All right, I'm gonna make the prerequisite joke about being on a panel about AI when we're trying to figure out AV or audiovisual. So hopefully we'll be able to opine on the state of AI even better than we were AV. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here in what's sure to be a vibrant, even though the room isn't super phenomenal, but we are in a vibrant, thought-provoking conversation. My name is Claire Leibowicz, and I lead the AI and Media Integrity Program at the Partnership on AI, which is a global, multi-stakeholder nonprofit that develops rigorous resources and recommendations for AI that serve humanity. And meaningfully, they get tested and implemented in practice. We were founded in 2016 by the heads of AI research at some of the largest technology companies, so Facebook, Apple, Amazon, DeepMind, IBM, Microsoft, and Google, but we've grown into a global partnership of over 120 institutions from civil society, like Witness, Code for Africa, and the ACLU in the United States, to industry, like OpenAI, to media, like the BBC and the Associated Press, and even academic institutions as well. And for the past almost decade, we've been confronting AI's impact on media and information, which is going to be the focal point of this conversation. And recently, we developed our synthetic media framework with 18 signatories, establishing technology policy guidelines for the responsible creation, distribution, and development of synthetic media. And that was released alongside detailed case studies of implementation by organizations from TikTok to Bumble to the BBC. And I encourage you to take a look at syntheticmedia.partnershiponai.org. But enough about me. We're at a critical moment for the veracity of media, its place as a record of reality. As synthetic media or AI-generated content, like deepfakes, one example, has evolved from a technological curiosity to something that's enmeshed in our daily lives. These developments bring three key challenges. There's, of course, the improvement in realism, which we're going to talk about, but also the cheapness and accessibility and how simple it is to share this material now. And even the emergence of what some will talk about, the liar's dividend, this idea that people in positions of power can merely say that something was created with AI when it actually wasn't, to discredit it. So of course, there are opportunities for creativity and storytelling, even in journalism, but it can also threaten democracy and the veracity of artifacts that we hold dear. So what can we as journalists do to prepare for this increasingly realistic audio and video? How do we leverage tools like detection, which we'll talk about? What represents the state of the art and how we can actually gauge if content is deceptive using AI? What's happening in the real world? How do we bridge from technology development and tool development to actually the content that people around the world encounter? And how do we prepare for a future where these images and videos are only going to get better and cheaper to make? So each panelist here brings a wealth of knowledge from the front lines of this task, and it's a wonderful blend of technology and journalism and advocacy all across this panel. First, we're going to do a series of brief lightning talks to help calibrate us to where we are in this field. We'll start with Luisa Verdoliva, a full professor of computer science in Naples who leads the Multimedia Forensics Lab, and she will set the stage by examining what's the state of the art in deepfakery, how can we respond with technical tools, and make sense of the detection landscape. Then we'll hear from Nilesh Christopher, an award-winning journalist and current Nieman Fellow at Harvard who covers tech, business, and culture and how those all intersect, who will help us understand what's going on in the real world. What have we seen as deepfakes make their way out into the world, especially as it relates to politics and this super election year that many have fretted over? And last but not least, Sam Gregory, the catalyst for this panel, is the executive director of Witness and a leader in technology and human rights advocacy who's devoted his entire career to thinking about how we preserve the integrity of visual evidence and trust in that material as well. He'll share insights from his work making these detection tools actually useful and accessible to journalists around the world who are on the front lines of interpreting the veracity and integrity of media. So the stakes are quite high, and I'm so excited to welcome Louisa to kick things off for us, technology enabling.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you very much for presenting me and also for inviting me for this panel. I'm very happy to be among all these journalists and to share my knowledge with them. Okay, so, I don't have to explain that everybody of you have seen the rapid evolution of synthetic image generation. So here you can see fully synthetic images that were generated using some old model, which are the generative adversarial network. So these are images generated with models a few years ago. Right now, you have even something more advanced, so you can just write a text prompt and generate images. So these are generated using so-called diffusion models, so new models that are more powerful and more easy to use. And okay, you can find all such images over the web. We receive daily cases of journalists saying, hey, can you help me to understand if this image is real or fake? What can we do? How can we defend from generative AI? First of all, can we detect fakes by visual inspection?
Show of hands.
So left or right, do you have some, is it easy to do that? Because, when you talk with journalists, sometimes they tell, oh, but I can understand because I can see this, this, and this. Okay, yes, but, technology advances really very fast. So for example, here it's even not difficult. The first one is synthetic, is fake. And if we go, we make a zoom, can you notice any inconsistencies in corneal specular highlights? So actually the corner reflexes, let me see if I can show you, from left and right now is not perfectly symmetric. And so you can notice there are papers, even scientific papers, that actually show that you can detect such type of difference of asymmetry. But also I've seen so great advancement in terms of technology in the last few years, and this will actually disappear. And you will not have this, this trace and this visual trace anymore. And so what can we do? So especially what I actually do is work on hidden artifacts. So invisible traces, invisible forensic traces that you cannot visually see, but you can detect. And what we do is actually use AI to detect AI-generated media. Indeed, the most successful forensic detectors use AI, and they use large data sets of real and generated images in order to train a model, and so that we can distinguish real from fakes. So first of all, we need large-scale data sets. Just to give you an idea, for example, to train a forensic detector, you need around 800,000 images to train, so really a lot of data. And they are quite successful, so let's make an example. How good are such AI-based detectors? So here I'm showing to you the results of a model that was trained using progressive Going-on images. So we used all images coming from a specific model, and then we test on the same model, but even other type of different models. And you can see that the score is good. It's quite high. Here, 50% means coin tossing, and so 100%, 90% is good. But when you test this same model on images coming from different generators, so like the diffusion models I've shown to you before, then performance go down. Even on commercial tools, the performance are not good. Okay, so let's change and let's consider a model that was trained on a variant of diffusion models, like latent diffusion models. So now the performance changes. So you can see an inversion. We are very good on diffusion models, worse on GAN models, good even on commercial tools, which actually means that these commercial tools probably are using the diffusion models. Okay, so first problem of detectors is generalization. So AI-based detectors learn from a large number of examples. And if we don't have the right data in the training, we can actually not predict the right things in our test dataset. So this is especially important because we want to how can we generalize to new unseen generative models? So this is really hard. And why this? I mean, why is so difficult? Here I'm showing to you a real image and some different generated synthetic images. And okay, we do not go into the technical details, but I'm showing to you these forensic hidden artifacts that each of such image is embed. And you can see that these artifacts, which are like sort of peaks in these images, are different one to another. So if I train on a specific model, I'm not sure to detect also other type of forensic traces. And these traces are not present in real images. And okay, one good thing is that also different generators can share the same fingerprint. So for example, one good thing that happened to us a few years ago was that we made available a detector that was trained on this latent diffusion, and then all these mid-journey images came out, and our detector was very much successful, and it was explained because actually probably mid-journey was uses a generator that was very much similar to the one we used in training. And in fact, the fingerprints are actually the same. And another problem for the forensic detectors is that these forensic traces are very weak. So if you have like an image like the Pope and you say, oh great, your detector is telling us this is fake with the probability of 99%, what can happen is that this same image over the social networks is shared multiple times. Hence, it can be processed multiple times. For example, you can modify it a bit, maybe crop the image or resize it and modify, and it becomes low-quality image, and then, okay, the detector is not working anymore. And so the journalist asked you, hey, but on this image it works, on this other image it says the contrary. Why? Okay, so the reason is that forensic traces tend to vanish and the detector fails. And of course, so you need maybe to work on the initial upload, the first upload over the web, not just run the detector on all the images without knowing what they are doing. And another important thing is interpretability. So scores are quite difficult to interpret. So what does this 80%, for example, of integrity score mean? And above all, it is based on which type of evidence? This is quite difficult to explain. For us, it's difficult. So there are ways to try to better interpret the result. So for example, what we did was, instead of answering to the question, is this video manipulated? Is this a deep fake? Is this the person who is claimed to be? Which means that we are trying to work on the biometrics of the specific person that can be explained. It's explainable. You can say, the biometric traits, the facial landmarks, the way this person is moving his head is not exactly what the real person would do. And so we can actually work on this, and we developed a method that only requires a very limited number of pristine videos during test, and it's actually working on the biometric features. This method is also working on audio, on the video, on both modalities, and it can be powerful. But again, it's not that everything is like that. So, as a conclusion, most promising solutions are based on artificial intelligence, but really don't use black box solutions online unless you know how they were trained. So which data were used during training? Otherwise, it's it's random. You don't know what's happening. Detectors often rely on invisible weak forensic traces, and so you should actually retrieve the first or initial upload on the web in order to have more reliable results. Try to use explainable solutions and never rely on one single detector, never. Because actually, each detector exploits some specific traces, so it's good to have different type of detectors. Okay.
Thanks, Louisa. We'll applaud at the end for all the speakers. Now Nilesh is going to show us what we've been seeing in the wild.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming for the talk. I'll talk about the on-ground uses and usage trends that we saw in the 2024 election cycle. I was based in Bangalore, and this is from my reporting in 2024. And the second part, we'll talk about challenges in detection and where do we go from there. The first ever use of deepfakes in an Indian election happened in 2020. I broke the news story of a politician in the capital city of Delhi who created a 50-second video when he was criticizing his political opponent and calling him a cheat, and this was in the Hindi language. What he did was he also created 2 other deepfakes in Haryanvi and English to specifically target cohorts of voters. And there was no labeling on this video, and it was shared across 5,000 WhatsApp groups. The technology back then in 2020, it's now primitive. It's called GAN-based, as Luisa talked about. And they used a lip-sync dubbing algorithm, which means the entire face and the voice was a dub. What was manipulated was just the lips. They manipulated the algorithm to fit the target audio in this case. So people were rightfully scared of deepfakes and its potential impact on democracies across the globe. What happened over the past 5 years, as you all know, in just 2024 alone, $110 billion were invested in this generation side. We have numerous open source and closed source tools available, audio to audio, audio to video, you name it. There are several multimodal options. And every major political party in India used these tools to create content. And the uses were across the spectrum. We saw politicians creating deepfaking themselves. These are called auth fakes, authentic fakes. They created digital avatars of themselves, recorded audios, and then those videos were personalized with the names of voters and sent across to about 50,000 voters in the Indian elections. There were also AI fake voice calls in the voices of different politicians in multiple different languages. We discovered during an investigation for Wired that over 50 million voice calls were made in the lead up to the elections. Then we had examples of AI-generated content to create political ads. We have the Indian Prime Minister as a warrior who's defending the country, working towards Hindu Renaissance. This sort of evokes a certain emotional response with the audiences. And then you had good old deceptive fakes. Extremely popular actors endorsing political parties across the spectrum when in actuality they did not. But what I'll talk about today was one of the most complicated cases, and I have to thank people in the panel for helping me out with this. In the lead up to the elections, we have 2 leaked audio clips of this Indian politician accusing his own party of corruption that went viral, that was shared by his opposition. But as soon as it went viral, he came out and said, this is a deep fake, and haven't you seen AI fakes of Drake and other singers go viral online? The local media took his comments at face value and moved on, but having covered this for several years, I wanted to investigate this further. But here's where I faced challenges. The first one was democracy groups working on, democracy groups and NGOs working on this did not have the expertise, local expertise to help me with it. And tech companies that were working on forensic audio clips were too touchy. They refused to help me out with it, fearing political backlash. This sent me down the route where I had to find the right partner with the expertise to help me out. That's when I came across Witness, led by Sam Gregory. They had the Deepfake Rapid Response Task Force. It's a consortium of companies who do forensic testing of alleged audio and video clips. So I sent it to them, and we conducted 3 independent evaluations, human and automated ones. And in one specific context, we took 50 minutes of this person's real pristine audio from his speeches online on YouTube and created a personalized bespoke model, and then compared it to the alleged fake audio. And then we were able to declare that the second clip was fake. This also showcases the challenge that we have in detection, because the first clip, we couldn't sort of prove the veracity completely because there was a lot of noise in the video. And that's the problem with audios and videos you find in the wild. Those are compressed, they have noise, and it makes journalists' job harder. We'll talk about more in the Q&A. This leads us to the question of what Sam and others have described as the detection equity gap. Those in the global south who need these AI detection tools the most do not have access to these tools. And often we rely on universities in the West or specialized NGOs who are able to offer us access. And there are also challenges in detection. What we faced was a single tool that's available for AI detection doesn't generalize well for different contexts and different languages. One of the problems is most of political communications in India happens on WhatsApp, where the audio video is compressed. Once it's compressed, it's very difficult to put it in a detector and reliably pronounce that it's fake or not. If there's one thing that I would urge others to look at, your detector is only as good as the data it is trained on, so always keep an eye out for it. I was extremely hopeful coming into 2025 that we saw multiple AI detection companies and NGOs come together to offering the service. ITSR in India specialized in Indian language and detection, and True Media was publicly available. Unfortunately, I don't know if detection system is sustainable anymore, because after the election, both of them have turned off their services. Finally, what's next? I believe everybody saw this as the year of the deepfake election, but when it didn't turn out, they said like, deepfake is not going to impact democracies in a big way. And there are several examples to contest that. One is OpenAI just loosened its rules around the creation of realistic images and videos. These are images and videos that I created based on two contemporary rumors happening in India, mass-scale conversion of Christians and allegedly Muslims sabotaging railway lines. These tools are getting better at producing content, better fidelity, and more consistent characters across the pipeline of creation. So all these just point towards the direction that detection is getting harder and harder. We need more investments in this space. Happy to chat more. Thank you.
Thanks, Nilesh. And now over to Sam.
Thank you. Hello. Real pleasure to be on this panel to talk about the work we do at Witness. Witness has been working for about 7 or 8 years on synthetic media and deepfakes within something we call our Prepare, Don't Panic work. And in the last 18 months, we've really focused on how do you support particularly global majority organizations, journalists, fact checkers, human rights organizations, to be trained on the use of detection and to also have access to the Deepfakes Rapid Response Force that was mentioned here. And really glad Louisa is, of course, on the academic side of that, on the support side, and Nilesh was someone who used that force last year. And I want to flag, if you're interested in more information, there's a link on the screen for our broader work, and we have a session tomorrow on the broader world of deceptive AI video. And we're releasing today a set of sort of handy guides on how to detect AI in really simple terms. This was partially supported by Microsoft, so thank you to the team there. Let me go into some real-world cases to really ground what Nilesh and Louisa were describing and what we've seen globally. So the Rapid Response Force connects local journalists and fact-checkers to approximately 30 to 40 of the world's leading experts on media forensics, going from leading researchers like Louisa and her team who work particularly on AI-based techniques to folks working on manual forensics as well, because in some cases that is still, or like older forms of forensics, let me say. And I want to just share a few of the clips that were hardest, because I figure this helps us ground ourselves. So this is case number 49. This was last July. It was a video showing the Philippine president snorting cocaine, allegedly. The clip had no audio, and the teams were unable to engage with it for the reasons that Louisa described. It was very low quality, recycled footage. This was 2 cases, one from Sudan, one from Cambodia, where there was a call discussing an intention to commit a war crime and a call discussing an intention to kill a political opponent. In that case, a number of the forensics teams we worked with were unable to assist with the analysis because those were in Arabic and Khmer, right, 2 languages that they weren't capable of working with. So again, you're going to hear me basically continually describing the way these tools are not apt or useful to the people who need them most. Case number 40, again from Sudan. This was a leaked walkie-talkie conversation instructing to target and bomb civilians. In this case, there was a real challenge because some of the detectors weren't trained on walkie-talkie conversations. They were trained on other media formats, and that made it much harder to get a strong confirmation or other result around them. And this case goes to a challenge that we see repeatedly. This is a case from Mexico of an image that supposedly shows President López Obrador posing with El Chapo, the drug lord. It is not a real image. You can find the original image. It is a relatively simple manipulation. The problem with this one is something we see repeatedly, is that most public detectors, so if you Google a public detector, as often as not give false results, but the results spread really quickly. So people put in a video or a photo, they get back a result that suits their point of view, and they start sharing it, but it is as likely or not correct. This is a case from Ghana. Ghana had presidential elections last year, and it was a video in which the vice president said something compromising in relation to a local political context. When the video came out, and this was a video that was shot in front of a crowd with multiple people filming, he denied that the video was real and said it had been doctored. And what he was tapping into here is the general lack of public understanding about what you can and can't do with AI. The sort of AI is magic pixie dust that can fake anything. And in this case, the forensics experts very deliberately said to us, and we prepare a dossier for the journalists to communicate, we're not going to do forensic analysis on this, because then you're going down the wrong rabbit hole. Right here, the problem is this is not possible with AI. It's not within the capabilities, and instead we should focus on explaining what is possible in capabilities and public education. So we didn't do forensic analysis on it. We provided information about why this was not possible in order to prove that this was real, not deepfaked. And I want to point to a statistic to sort of ground Nilesh's example. We were very proud to work with Nilesh and Louisa and others on that case in India. About a third of the cases we receive are likely authentic. That means someone is saying that something real has been faked with AI, essentially plausibly denying the real because they know it'll be hard to prove that it was real. And those are primarily, at least in the sample set over the last year and a half, audio conversations. But as you see, we sometimes see it with video and images. And proving something real is actually quite complicated, right? It's not actually easy. It may be more complicated than proving fake in some contexts. I want to point to the looming challenge here that I think is probably obvious from many of the conversations on this panel is we didn't deal with that many cases last year. Like this idea that we were going to have an election apocalypse with deepfakes didn't happen. Thank goodness. No one wanted that, right? But as Nilesh and Louisa observe, it's getting easier to create this content, it's more realistic, and we see the strains on the capacity to do this detection that are technical. They're also related to, where the weight is being placed. And this visualization is just imagining as these cases proliferate. And Nilesh referred to it. We describe something called the detection equity gap, which is the idea that unfortunately the burden to do detection falls inequitably globally. It is felt most by people who are not supported by the training data sets, by the training, by the resourcing that happens here, primarily in the global majority, lesser resourced journalists, civil society, and human rights defenders. Let me end with two places where Witness is doing work on this. One is based on the Deepfakes Rapid Response Force, we've developed a benchmark. Benchmarks are often used to test tools. That is a genuinely use-based benchmark. Do tools and techniques actually work in the real world? Are they accessible? Do they work in multiple languages? Do they fit journalistic workflows? Because otherwise we're going to end up with more abstract tools that don't really work for the people who need them. And then the second thing, and there's a QR code on here, and in the discussion I'll talk more about some of the tips we have around how to do this. We have basically 5 things you should know in terms of how to talk to the public, how to decide whether to use a tool, and if you're going to use a tool, how to use them. So very simple guidance that is being distributed now to help people ground themselves at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. So a wonderful arc between all of the presentations. So we landed where Sam was with some practical tips for journalists, and I guess other than inundating Louisa's inbox or everyone joining the Witness Deepfakes Rapid Response Task Force, what are best practices for journalists? Maybe Sam, we can start with you and some of the tips in that sheet and beyond.
Sure. I think, and you'll see this in the tip sheets, the first thing is you need to understand exactly the things that Louisa described at the beginning, right? That these tools are not, accurate even in the best context, beyond probably 85 to 90%. Different media requires different tools, and you need to use multiple media. And I'll tell you the process we've been recommending to folks and then hand over to others to talk about dimensions that they focus on. we generally actually discourage people from using AI tools at the start of the process. We say start with a media literacy approach. We use sift, stop, investigate the source, find alternative coverage, trace the original, because many cases that get sent to us on the force are actually shallow fakes, just miscontextualized media where people are assuming it's a deep fake. And in fact, it'd be much easier to try and trace down the original image and do that work. Then we say to people, do the glitch analysis. That's the type of looking for like the corneal reflections, but don't put too much weight on it because it's going away. Do metadata analysis. Then think about OSINT techniques, right? Can you work out where this is coming from and the context is being shared online? And then you might want to go to AI detection tools to then think about what is going to happen based on that information. But it's a really bad idea to start from the AI detection. Instead, you build up to that, and then you look at the results from the AI detection tools and a range of them, and you place it in that context.
Any other thoughts?
Yes, I would say, at the outset, everything that Sam said was mentioned. First, try to look for the source. Reverse image searches, traditional fact-checking ways of getting at the truth is your first pass. And the second pass is always be suspicious of online public detectors. They often, especially when you upload an image, it says 80% certain that a bunny being pulled out of a hat is real or something like that. So be suspicious of public detectors. Do not always use it. Reach out to experts, not just as towards the end we can talk about specific companies or people who are doing this kind of forensic detection. And then try to sort of forge relationships with fact checkers so that they can get the first pass at it before you move to AI detection.
So just to clarify, if a company came to me and said they could detect if something's AI generated with 99% certainty,
Don't believe.
don't believe. Louisa.
What data did you train it on? How many languages did you do it? Like, that should be a line of questioning.
Yeah, so the problem is this. I mean, you should be aware, you should have some knowledge about the tools you're using. I mean, do not use tools that you find online. Maybe connect with the experts and discuss with them. And even for the cases that Sam mentioned, there is a lot of discussion between the journalists, I mean, we did a lot of discussion with Nadish when we solved the case, and with the experts, with the tools. So we always run different tools. We are different people working on them, and I mean, really, I think that journalists need to connect with the experts, and in order to be educated in how to use these tools and which type of things are actually can work today and which things are not working.
And Louisa, how has working with journalists affected your sense of the technology you built? Has that kind of gone that way as well?
So I mean, the most, what I was probably, even because I didn't have the background for audio. So what, for example, is really different when we work with lab data sets, built at universities, and the real life is that audio is difficult because of noise, but also because sometimes there is music in the background and you didn't expect that, or you have overlapping voices, and this is something that is really very challenging. So sometimes we don't have data sets that represent very well what we can find, in the real life. Mm-hmm. For images and videos, so we have a lot of data where we actually compress the data. We have low quality data because we want to be robust to possible modifications, and a lot of detectors actually are robust to compression. But you cannot really imagine what can happen in the real life, or even over social networks. I think that some images are shared really multiple times, and you can do whatever. You can add a text, you can modify a bit. So it's difficult to predict all possible manipulations, and so to train a detector that include actually everything. So it's important for us to understand which are the scenarios that will most likely happen in real life. And so because we can actually make a detector more robust to some specific operations by including such operations during training. So for example, we have a data set of images, we can add also compressed images or images with reduced dimension, like resized images, manipulated images in some specific way, and the detector will actually improve and be actually better. For example, the last work we have done was, and it's not online yet, but was actually to understand what happens to a detector when it is trained with the latest models. You say, okay, till now I have these models, let's train on this, and let's see what happens when the time evolves and new models come, and how performance change over time. Mm-hmm. And this is important because till now we actually have some limited knowledge. We cannot predict the future and say what will happen in a month. And so it's important to understand what happens to a detector when time changes.
And I was struck in your presentation by it's not just detecting AI, period. It may be better at DALL-E than Midjourney, than all these different providers.
And then I didn't talk about that, but you can even modify locally an image. So you can have a real image and just make a local modification. So the image is not fully generated, it's just modified on some specific part. And so you need a different detector for that type of manipulation. So, the space is really very large with the very different things that you can do, including shallow fakes, like chip fakes, what you can actually do with like composition or recontextualization and things that you did in the past. And everything is mixed in the web over a social network. So, even if you have a detector that is specialized for a specific manipulation, you don't know what you have at this time. So this is really difficult.
So stopping short, I guess, of having a perfectly representative data set of all the real-world examples to train on, maybe Sam or Nilesh, how do we improve detection for journalists? How do we close the equity gap and also just make these tools better serve the people that are on the front lines of this fight?
I think Sam can talk about the detectors and all of it, but in terms of responsibility of social media platforms and the AI labs like OpenAI that create these generation tools, I think they have to start putting out detectors or start working towards what you call AI nutrition labels, which are basically signals to the public that showcase that these are synthetically generated. OpenAI I said, loosened its rules, right? And in the image that I showed, you guys might have missed it, but because at the bottom right corner, there was a small icon, which is a watermark for all the videos that is generated using their models. Number one is educating the public that these are the signs that you could look out for, is one. And number two, making it more and more public that this technology is coming. You will come across such videos, realistic videos in the wild, and you should be suspicious of it. I think this is where platforms are failing. My favorite go-to example is Levin Labs. It is an audio generation startup which has raised billions of dollars. A whole year before the US elections, they said these are no-go voices, which is Trump and Biden. But throughout the elections in the global south, none of the prime ministers featured in these countries whose voices were no-go. So you could go ahead and create synthetic audios of these extremely powerful people. We have different standards in terms of enforcing trust and safety. That needs to change. And Levin Labs should also be forthcoming in putting out their own detectors. Sam?
Yeah, I'll second everything Nilesh just said. I think the way we tend to think about it is you need to think about it at multiple levels. So there is definitely a resourcing and capacity and training support to journalists to understand this. And also to understand how to communicate around AI. I think it's a very important act of communicating to the public about the imperfection of results without raising more doubts. We saw in the US elections a very high degree of public misunderstanding and skepticism in social media platforms where people thought things were AI generated when they weren't and got extremely confused. So trying to support journalists on that. Building better access to detection models. We run a global rapid response mechanism. Those should be available at a local level for the hardest cases, and companies should be supporting them. The second level is that we need to think about how we push tech platforms and regulations to really support access to the ability to understand how AI is being used in the content at a more systemic level. Nilesh was referring to labeling. One area that we do a lot of work on is the area of disclosing the use of AI, things like the C2PA standard, which folks may be familiar with. And those are not foolproof, but they do help you sift through the information. They basically give some sense of the recipe of AI and human that you're encountering in a piece of media and how it's shared online. And a lot of this is about triage. I think that's the worry that I have, is that the volume is going to increase, and our triage tools, which is always the problem in journalism, are not getting much better in relation to that volume. And then, absolutely that requires the tech companies to do that better and to participate in that. And it also potentially requires regulation that enforces it. So one of the reasons we created this benchmark, it's called the TRIDE benchmark, is to say if you're putting emphasis in something like the EU AI Act or something similar on detection, you should make sure it works for the people who need it, works globally, works effectively. And one way to do that is to set benchmarks around it that are genuinely applicable for the world. So think about the infrastructure from that perspective.
So to close out before we move to audience questions, I warned them this would be rapid fire. In 30 seconds, one more thing that we would want the journalists in the room to take away. And I said I'd start with who's next to me.
So one more thing that journalists...
Just one more thing journalists should take away holistically.
Yeah, I think that maybe... what I would like to give to them is like a detector that says, okay, you're giving to me this image, I cannot work on it, it's too bad quality, skip it, like giving a confidence. So I think that, again, never use black box tools that do not explain, do not tell you when they are good, when they are not good.
So channel your journalistic skepticism towards tools.
Online detector tools are only as good as the data they're trained on. Always question that. Number 2, don't blindly trust online detectors. Number 3, ahead of an election cycle, when we'll see a spike, forge partnerships with researchers and people who are working on this sector so that you can reach out to them when you need it the most.
Build on your existing skill sets. They often are the ways you're going to resolve a decision around AI. Be skeptical yourself, understand the weaknesses of AI detection tools, but as you explain it to the public, don't encourage unwarranted skepticism in the public.
Wonderful. We'll turn to audience questions. Oh, thank you. Yeah, let's give everyone a round of applause. We have a mic runner, and I designate people. Why don't we start? You had your hand up first, and maybe you can introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hello. Excuse me for my voice. I'm a little bit sick. My name is Nora, and I'm a journalist of Belarus and Service of Radio Free Europe. And I actually like to ask, we know that today such technologies like deepfake is not only about the real politics, it's about the daily life, and every day more and more women, and not only, becomes victims of deepfake. It could be like deepfake porn, etc. And maybe such tools are not used only in the journalism politician world. And maybe here is some protocol what you should or should not do if you really become a victim of such type of attack.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising that issue, because it clearly is one of the other really clear sets of uses of synthetic media that we see all the time. In the Deepfakes Rapid Response Force, we generally have not done those cases so much, and one of the reasons is often the detection is not the issue, right? It's very clear that they've been faked, and proving they've been faked is not the point. So one of the ways we encourage, and it does vary by jurisdiction, is to look at what the legal recourse is versus engaging in the public debate about whether it's faked or not, which tends to increase the attention on it. In many cases, people are trying to avoid focusing attention on it because they are falsified. So trying to think about ways to use legal recourse rather than amplify attention on the piece of content.
And I would just say in the United States, there is more targeted legislation, to Sam's point, and No Fakes Act. I think actually just in Connecticut or New Jersey, a bill passed. So there has been more, not just generalist deepfakes law, but criminalizing deepfake porn that will allow more opportunities to fight back, hopefully. You were next, I think.
Hello. Hi, I really loved the entire session. Thank you so much for the talk. I would love to ask, how would you see the future of journalism and AI intersect? Because I don't see it intersecting, and I do want it to intersect, because I have a background in multimedia journalism, and now I work as an AI prompt engineer at Amazon. So I know, because the way I see it in the future is that the tech will ensure that the tech gets stronger, and the journalists will always be opposed, right? Because then they'll always be skeptical as to what is fake, what is not fake. Would we even believe anything that these chatbots will spit out? So is there an intersection in the future, and is there any way that journalists can leverage AI in their use as journalists?
Okay, can I? Yeah. Okay, so two things. So one is actually that AI now can be used for everything. So you can use AI even for enhancement, right? You want to improve an image and you want to make it better, and you can use it. So there will be traces of AI generation even on images that are, good with no way. I mean, so I think that the web will be more and more full of generated content, even not malicious. I mean, so this would be actually one important problem. And I think also that detection alone is not going to survive. I mean, you need something more. Detection, as we are doing right now, is passive detection. So you are just taking what you can find over the web, and do this analysis. But there is a lot right now in terms of active methods. So trying to protect data. So like inserting some signature in the images, in the videos, in order to protect them. And probably this will become more and more, important. I mean, you can even, for example, copy the style of an artist, and this is also a problem. So I think that there will be, and there is already, but there will be more and more work on active methods, and in the future. So it's like trying to do both passive analysis and active ones. The detection alone, I don't think can win in the long time.
Can I also just share, so in those case studies I alluded to at the beginning, the BBC, who's been a real kind of proponent of some of the content authentication methods that Sam talked about, like C2PA, which is to prove that content actually is from the BBC, because they're nervous about AI rejecting, people rejecting that. They wrote a whole case study for us about how they used synthetic media and deepfake technology to obfuscate the faces of those in a story about Alcoholics Anonymous in a video in order to preserve their anonymity, but also capture the emotional tenor in a way that typical anonymization techniques would not. So this is an example of an institution that's both pursuing some of these defensive strategies for preserving the integrity of their content, and then using a similar technology to tell a more truthful story and experiment and embrace some of it. So, it's dual use, which is what makes it challenging to govern and build all these important responses to. Yeah. Sam or Nilesh?
I'm saying in terms of a writer, a traditional journalist, you see, the future, I believe, is a little uncertain in the way in which it's done. However, I've seen content authentication, especially on the video side, there has been some improvements on that front. A friend of mine, Jay Mark, built a bot. He's a Filipino journalist. He built a GPT where he would upload the budget documents put out by the government to search and query new stories or relationships that helps him investigate better. So we are seeing some innovation on like RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, to be able to go into the archives and find find new threads and new stories. But as such, writing and the fault lines of how much do you use as a writer, that's still playing out, and it's being debated on how where do we cross the red lines, yeah.
Let me add one thing there, because it's a big focus of our work at Witness, is how do you enable journalists and human rights defenders to make good choices about how they adopt, good choices about how they resist, and to play a really strong voice in shaping. So one strand of work we're developing at the moment is how do journalists and others protect the integrity of their own data against likely ways in which it might be manipulated. And that can be everything from how you film, how you preserve data, how you share it in a way that might make it harder for someone to manipulate it. So again, to Luisa's comment about active measures, how do we take very strong active measures to preserve the factuality of information at the same time as we do things with AI that are fundamentally about access and inclusion, right? Like translation, versioning, a greater accessibility to image and video creation. Those are all powerfully important ways to increase access and inclusion.
I think we have time for one more question. 1 minute, a quick question. I think you had your hand up.
Do you offer training, for me, I don't create content anymore, but I train journalists. I'm Lara from Jordan, by the way. And through the Media Lab, I'm just wondering, how can we build our capacity to offer this, to build the capacity of other journalists? Do you have these online platforms or somewhere where we can get certified or?
I can give a quick answer, which is to say, in the coming year, we're going to expand the range of open trainings we do. And part of the reason we've developed these training materials is to try and make it accessible to different constituencies. Yeah.
I'm involved in a European project where they actually do training sessions. So maybe I can give you some information about that.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll stick around for a little bit and end on time.